You're listening to the CaribClimate Podcast, produced by the Investment Plan for the Caribbean Regional Track of the Pilot Program for Climate Resilience, funded by the Inter-American Development Bank through the Climate Investment Funds, and implemented by the Project Management Unit of the University of the West Indies Mona Office for Research and Innovation. Jamaica, the land of wood and water. A small country with a big impact through food, music, and timeless icons like Bob Marley and Marcus Garvey. A Caribbean soft powerhouse, hit hard by climate change. In this episode of the CaribClimate Podcast, we speak with Claire Bernard, Deputy Director General of Sustainable Development and Social Planning at the Planning Institute of Jamaica, the focal point for the Jamaica National PPCR project. Jamaica's geographic location means responding to climate change is an urgent priority. Claire provides us some context on the country's most pressing climate challenges.
I think maybe we would say extreme hydrometeors. And I know I'm not talking jargons now, but it's the way they're described. So we're talking about extreme events like droughts and hurricanes and so on. I think you know that we're located in a hurricane belt, and so we experience major hurricanes in a general way. Once we have the hurricane season, it is likely that at least some storm will pass within, say, 30, 50 miles of Jamaica. When we're not having those storms, we're having extreme droughts. So I think that combination of droughts and floods and hurricanes and so on, I would say would constitute our most critical climate events.
For years, despite the major economic sectors being sensitive to climate change, there was limited focus on climate-specific projects. So what was the state of Jamaica's climate change response before the PPCR?
Well, Jamaica has, because of our geographic location and our vulnerability to these kinds of, and I'm sorry I have to use the word again, these kind of hydrometeorological events. So we know what those are, and I'm sure my colleagues have used the word as well. We have been part of the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change process for well over 25 years. Despite that, however, until about 2010, we did not have any focused climate change projects in a major way. And we had been seeing that we've been ravaged by hurricanes consistently, and that it had been getting worse. So I'm sorry, in the Planning Institute of Jamaica, as part of the disaster risk management framework, we are tasked with assessing the impacts of hurricanes and droughts and so on. And we noticed when we started doing that in 2002 that we had been having repeated impact that had had such effect that we were losing upwards of 1 to 2% of GDP per annum, particularly because of either major flooding events or from hurricanes or storms. And of course, there were years in between that when the drought was so severe that that had a major impact, not only on our ability to feed ourselves, pushing up the food import bill, but also having a direct impact on the country's bottom line. So there were those issues, and we had been documenting them in the Planning Institute of Jamaica and had gone so far of even developing, I think it was called an agricultural productivity index, where we looked at the rate of change in agricultural production vis-a-vis a major hurricane event or drought event and so on. And so those are some of the things that led us in our Vision 2030 to identify a critical national strategic outcome as adaptation to climate change and disaster risk reduction. And so, as I said before, until about 2010, coming on the heels of Vision 2030, which was launched in 2009, we did not have any major programs or projects to deal with climate change.
Jamaica's National Development Plan was a precursor to the shift in the climate response landscape. Through international development assistance, projects like the National Pilot Program for Climate Resilience have been instrumental in boosting the climate response across these sectors.
We have 3 or 4 projects, depend on how you look at them. So we call them initially we call them IP 1, 2, 3, and 4. These 4 projects look at, and I'm going to use the shortened name. They look at climate data, which is the improving climate data um, management and information project. Then we have the adaptation program and financing mechanisms. Those were originally 2, but 2 investment programs, but merged for management processes. And then the third or fourth, depending on how you look at it, is the Fisheries project, which is promoting climate resilience in vulnerable communities in the fisheries sector or fisheries related sector. That's not the correct name of the project, but that's what is looking at. So those are the 4 areas of intervention. So you wanted to know what those initiatives are, and the climate data look at really building out um, or increasing the country's access to information on climate. And you can understand that that is over the long term and making projections way into the future. So it's the critical agencies under that project are the Meteorological Services Jamaica, the Water Resource Authorities, Rural Agriculture Development Agency, and so on. Ministry of Health, I shouldn't leave them out. And for the adaptation program, most of the work is being done in the Upper Rio Minno watershed, and we also target micro and small enterprises to help them to improve their adaptation capabilities, as well as targeting communities. And for the fisheries sector, naturally, we are working with over 40,000 fisher folk and the institutions that service them, the National Fisheries Authority, and so on. So those are the broad initiatives under the programs.
Claire delves a little deeper in how the different areas of the pilot initiatives improve climate adaptation and, to some extent, mitigation at the national level.
Jamaica's PPCR is primarily an adaptation program geared principally towards adaptation, but there are some mitigation co-benefits naturally. So the first thing perhaps I would say is for us our strategic program for climate resilience, which is really that blueprint um, for the PPCR program in Jamaica. It really sets the basis, as I said before, for adaptation. Because up to then, we still do not yet have a national adaptation plan. So essentially, what the strategic program has done is to take the objectives set out in Vision 2030 under outcome 14 and to try to build out different elements of that. So an important area of work is if you take the adaptation program and financing mechanism, for example, is to provide the financing mechanism. We developed two mechanisms to finance climate change adaptation in the country. One is the climate change special climate change adaptation fund, which provided grants to persons at the community level to assist in adaptation activities. Now, those adaptation activities could be linked to livelihoods, or it could be linked to actual building of community, building up or retrofitting community assets. So that was what we call the SCAF. The other one is a special line of credit, which is made available to small and micro enterprises in two particular sectors, tourism and agriculture. And so we were, through that, helping people to expand their water storage capacities in some of the agriculture sector, to help to put in elements of the agriculture sector, to help to put in irrigation systems, and so on. So that's the adaptation program and financing. Then if you take the climate data project, we built in building out the network of data collection facilities for the Met Service. We were able to put in over 60 automatic weather stations, and working with the Water Resource Authority, they got over 50 systems put in that help to modernize their operations, increase efficiency in their operations, facilitate greater turnaround time in terms of getting information for the field. So they are having real-time reporting system from their river gauges and so on. They could stay in their office and know what's happening in terms of how a particular river was flowing and those kinds of things. And also that contributed even to the build out of an early warning system in the Bugwalk Gorge, so that they were no longer depending on people having to go to the gorge to look what was happening to determine whether the gorge should be closed in the event of an extreme like a flooding event or a hurricane or so. They were able to do that remotely, getting the information and then being able to share that information with all the critical agencies that had responsibility for making decision um, in that area. And of course, all of these interventions that we're talking about have served to kind of help the country leverage additional resources towards building out its adaptation capacity.
Much emphasis on climate action is on land. However, one component of the Jamaica National PPCR focuses on enhancing community based resilience among targeted fishing communities in Jamaica.
The Fisheries project is the newest in terms of on the implementation. We were well into implementing the original program when we sought to get these additional resources for the fishery sector. So that program is really a little bit out of startup phase, but it's doing things like rehabilitating the nursery out at the fisheries factory out at Twickenham Park, because we want to be able to introduce aquaculture in a bigger way in the country. And so they're supposed to be doing fingerlings and rootstock to be able to supply to the wider trade. So that's one area. As I said, they're supposed to be developing what they call sub projects to find where the project will finance current fisher folk to help to reduce the, their takeoff from the marine environment, to introduce not only aquaculture, but I think it's called mariculture, where they can set up little nets towards in the shallow areas and grow shrimp or other kinds of fish products, and also to help them to get better equipment. So to introduce, I think they're calling it long line fishing.
The many components of Jamaica's national PPCR project have translated into many successes. Improving climate data and information management have made better the quality and availability of climate related data to respond to different sector needs and enable effective planning and design of adaptation initiatives.
So for me, I think they improved access to climate information for planning. I think from the vulnerability assessment done for the health sector, we've been able to improve access to water storage devices in at least 15 health facilities, and we have a costed plan that we can roll out to some of the other facilities once, as I said before, using this project to leverage other resources. An important element in terms of climate information is that the one of the projects provides for business continuity. So at places like the Meteorological Office and the Water Resource Authority, where particularly say in the event of a storm or and so on, we could lose electricity, the project has put in backup support so that they can continue operating and continue to inform the country, even in major hurricanes and so on. And of course, the work done with the University of the West Indies and so on, back to the issue of data, provides some much more accurate data for planning, and particularly because we are a climate sensitive country, then it's important to be able to use that information for, in say, development planning for location of major assets and so on. I think the program has facilitated improved operations in agencies. I think I'd mentioned that, like the Water Resource Authority.
The project also provided a helping hand to communities through knowledge transfer of adaptation techniques to improve farming practices, as well as other resource support.
At the community level, one of the things that we've definitely want to thank this project for is the expansion of an exposure of persons to climate smart agriculture techniques. And that is important because it's not only saving the environment, but it's also provided for more efficient use of people's time. It's also helping them to determine what are the best crops and livestock to produce in an area, because we even did soil suitability testing under this project and so on. And of course, from the financing situation, the project has provided access to resources for small farmers, persons at the community level, to be able to do some of the important adaptive work that they needed to do and would otherwise not have had the resources.
The PPCR has helped to integrate climate change across priority sectors of water, health, tourism, coastal resources, and human settlements. As a result, government agencies are better positioned to receive funding support to further their adaptation work.
And I think one of the important things, because we've been working with this blueprint, the main government agencies that have been working with the PPCR have been able to build the work into their work programs, so that the PPCR has become a steady source of financing their work programs. And that is facilitating mainstreaming as well. And at the same time, allow them to see what are areas that they can build on. So for me, those are some of the success stories for the PPCR. A word that I did mention was nature-based solutions. And I think that there have been areas, because that's a buzzword now, where the PPCR has definitely facilitated expansion in the use of nature-based solutions. So we're thinking about things like aquaponics. We're thinking about things like the protected agriculture, where they've introduced the greenhouses and so on. But building them in such a way that they are using not plastics and so on, but using natural products to help to advance the work that they're doing.
Public awareness has also been an important focus for the PPCR. Community activists and climate activists were heavily involved in the project. Local group Voices for Climate Change played a huge role in community engagement, using creative means and musical talent to promote climate action to the public.
Warning, 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 warning. To the world! Warning, warning, warning. Climate change is happening. We got to do something, no doubt. To the world, we're calling out. Hey. See the signs, they all reveal that global climate change is real. It's not a matter of when or how. Climate change is happening now. Sea levels are rising globally.
The National PPCR project boasts many wins for Jamaica, with some bumps along the journey. Community readiness and availability of technical expertise were among the many challenges encountered.
Our local PPCR is over 30 million US dollars. So it's a big project. And I told you the four broad areas of concentration. So one part of the issue is, especially when you're working in community, is community readiness. So you have resources you want to spend in communities, but communities need to be ready. You want, if you take something like the line of credit, you would expect that this was cheap money, 5-6% interest rate, that the MSMEs would come flocking to get that money quickly. It took a little while, it took a lot of work to interest them, because nobody wants to spend money to take on loans for some of these things. So that there was that kind of issue. There was also the question of the availability of the kind of technical expertise that we needed to be able to move the project as fast as possible. Because this is not the only project in town, as you know. There are major works going on in infrastructure development, and so some of those kind of skill sets that you need to bring onto a project like that, like this one, was not as easily available.
Claire shares the importance of national projects having a local focus, centering local knowledge and expertise, prioritizing stakeholder engagement, and community leadership are important to successfully mobilize projects.
So a lot of the work that was done, we also, because we have to advertise internationally, we had external consultants. One of the important lessons learned that worked for us is that we always ask for local counterparts to be part of the team. And so what we found is that in where some of those contracts were not like equipment, bringing in equipment and so on, the local persons were able to start the work, get some of the work done on the ground, maybe with the guidance of the external parties, but that the projects didn't come to a complete halt. So that for us is an important lesson learned. Another important lesson learned is that you have to know, especially where you're working in communities, you have to learn very early who are the gatekeepers, who are the influencers, and so on, and to try to bring those persons on board as much as possible to help to facilitate the process.
Implementing projects that advance the national goals and objectives of the country was a double win for PPCR Jamaica.
The alignment with Vision 2030, the National Development Plan, also I think, facilitated coherence in the planning process, so that when you're implementing the project, you really are implementing the objectives of your National Development Plan. And it also makes it easier to get the counterpart financing that you need through the Ministry of Finance and so on.
Implementing climate projects of national scale is quite the undertaking. Ensuring the sustainability of the initiatives is another mammoth task. Claire describes the PPCR's framework to build on the successful outcomes.
Okay, so for us, one of the important elements in the design of the PPCR was the sustainability. And it's not enough to assume that because it's a critical area that the project intervention and project investments will be sustained. So part of the sustainability approach has been the training. So if we talk about putting in this network, improving the network of automatic weather stations, but we facilitated training and cross-training of the Met Service staff to ensure that people there know how to, for want of a better word, manipulate or to use the stations. We facilitated the preparation of manuals so that they have, if they have staff change, the next persons who come in know how to operate, how to dismantle, and dismantle might not be the right word, but how to take down a station in the event of a major storm or something like that, and you want to protect the equipment. At the community level, we also train the persons in the communities. We also provide interface at different levels of the communities to ensure people understand the importance of the asset to them. So that's one element of the sustainability. We have asked that so for things that major equipment like the radar and so on, the project has facilitated the provision of spares for a period of time, so that it can't be said that, okay, the project has ended and there's a spare part needed and, they can't get them. So we have these long-standing maintenance contracts with suppliers for a period of time. And we also train persons in maintenance. At the community level, say we're in the upper Riamina watershed area, we work with the communities. We send people in the communities, animators and so on, to work with them. So if they're getting a rainwater harvesting system, they know how to clean them, those kinds of things, so that the asset lasts longer. And then there is a whole issue of the behavior change program that was introduced, which is helping from the community level to improve the behavior of the ordinary citizens.
The PPCR has also prioritized support to policymakers to ensure sustained use and application of climate data through training opportunities and information resources to continue the climate proofing of each priority sector.
From the policymakers' perspective, we have been trying to impress on them through training and exposure, again, the importance of using the data to inform their decisions. And we have been ourselves using the data to inform our decision. So at all time, we're talking about the importance and value of climate data. And in terms of the Met Service, they're working with the Finnish Meteorological Institute that is helping them to develop climate services that they can sell or make available to different elements of the community, again, so that our knowledge of climate and all of those become more relevant. The strategies and plans that have been developed are intended to be used in the agencies for the different sectors for the long term, again, to help to build the sustainability. So we really are hoping that the investments of the PPCR in Jamaica will not only bear the fruits that they're bearing now, but be the basis for continued development. And from our perspective, that we continue to ensure that the climate agenda remains part of the national development agenda. And the PPCR, as I said before, is catalyzing action, particularly from the information and examples provided, catalyzing action for improvement in our situation.
The CaribClimate Podcast is produced by the Investment Plan for the Caribbean Regional Track of the Pilot Program for Climate Resilience, funded by the Inter-American Development Bank through the Climate Investment Funds and implemented by the Project Management Unit of the University of the West Indies Mona Office for Research and Innovation. The CaribClimate Podcast, using data to make climate resilience greater.